Looking blankly over Callisto's head, I asked the whole story belatedly. What happened to us? We fell off the cliff. There was a waterfall under the cliff. We could survive without dying because we fell into the river. The Crown Prince, using a branch as a firecracker, rummaged through the bonfire and answered in an indifferent tone. When I came out carrying you around, I found this cave nearby. Only then did I take a closer look around. We had now set a bonfire not far from the entrance. The rain seemed to have stopped before we knew it, but outside the entrance was dark and I couldn't see an inch ahead. Only the occasional refreshing sound of water proved true that there is a waterfall. I turned my head again and looked inside the cave. It was quite a deep cave, but over the inside there was a dark cloud. What if it's the territory of a beast or a snake? A quite realistic idea crossed my mind. I felt my hand and found the crossbow lying next to me, but I soon remembered that I used up all my beads to kill the assassins. This is not an animal shelter, the prince added bluntly, as he was looking at my anxious face. While you were asleep I skimmed through it, and it was strangely empty. Do you know where we are? I asked the most important thing first. Even if the sun goes down, and we can't move, we have to go back quickly when the day comes. I had high hopes as he was a native of the imperial palace, but he shook his head mercilessly. We held every hunting contest in the northern forest, but I didn't even know there was a place like this. I sighed. I must be going crazy by now. It was about time when I looked at the prince with a confused face, anticipating out of the forest that would have been turned over by me and the prince who had disappeared. On one shoulder of his reflected bonfire was a dry cut of blood. It was the place where the commendation was given. At the same time, just before falling off the cliff, I remembered him being stabbed by an assassin's sword. Your body, are you all right? He almost wiped me out and killed me, but it bothered me that he was hurt on my behalf. Are you asking now? You're asking me very early? Thank for your tears. I was a little embarrassed by the sarcastic remarks. In fact, I wasn't really worried if ML would die. Are you seriously hurt? Let me see. No, it's okay. He stopped me coldly as I was about to get up to see the scar. I didn't get deeply cut in it because I was wearing armor. It's just shred little blood. It was a relief, but I couldn't help but frown at the news of blood. I wish we could go back and get some treatment. You're worried, aren't you? Of course, I answered with a straight face. Of course, I wasn't worried about him. Don't die in front of me because I only worried for myself. If you want to die, go somewhere else, and don't die in front of me. I was mutter inwardly and listened to the gaze. He was staring at me with a queer face. Late to realize that there was room for my words to sound strange to him, my face heated up. It sounds like I'm telling him not to die. I was taken aback and hurriedly changed my words. And it's late, but thank you for saving me. Anyway, I had to admit it, apart from the fucking quest, Callisto got hurt on my behalf. And he didn't fling me out after falling off the cliff, and he saved me here. Am I a little off from trouble if we're going to meet? I still remember how crazy he was when he asked me to say goodbye with a knife in my neck. Looking at him anew, I met his red eyes head on. He was still staring at me with an unknown look. I felt a little awkward and turned my eyes. First, favorability 27%. Good feelings have risen. He picked up the corners of his mouth and twisted it up. If you're so grateful, you should fall in love with me again. I frowned at the persistence of another man talk. Your Highness, talking nonsense again. Isn't this just the right time for the princess to like me? Not at all, I answered immediately. Then I asked again because it was so stuffy, why the hell are you so obsessed with hearing my reasons? His obsession ended to the point where he even sent a threatening letter saying, don't forget your promise to tell me why you like me. At my question, the Crown Prince made a more ridiculous expression than I did. I can't stand wondering why the princess suddenly came after me that day and confessed her love. Well, I couldn't say. I tried to die once to see if there was a reset button. I opened my mouth with tears of blood in my past, when I made such a gibberish to avoid another moment's crisis. I must have been out of my mind at the time. I'm sorry, Your Highness. The Crown Prince laughed coldly. I've been waiting for weeks because I want to listen to it, and you suddenly changed in the middle and say hated me, so wouldn't it be unfair if princess were me? There was a burning desire to refute who the iron poison was from. But I didn't want to dwell on that terrible memory of the day anymore. So I corrected his excessive selling. I didn't say I hate you. So you're saying you still like me? No, I changed my words again with a shiver. Then tell me about the reason that I suddenly hated. 'Cause I don't want to talk to you all day long about that reason. However, the Crown Prince grinned like a ghost as he revealed his teeth. It's a perfect topic to talk to alone in the torture chamber of the Imperial Palace's underground prison for defaming the Imperial family. Isn't that right, scary bastard? I shut my mouth in amazement. A cool silence fell in the cave once. It was when I stared blankly at the end of the campfire dancing, wondering how the hell had happened. Why do you hate it? The silent Crown Prince asked abruptly. Yes, why did you suddenly change your mind? You said it was an insult to the Imperial family. I'll let you off this one time, so tell me. I stared at him in a daze and soon crumpled my face. Are you sure you don't know? Then he was a villain in the world. You tried to kill me. Now that he'd said he'll let it go, I've taken a bold shot at the reason. That's why I hit X countless times in the first place. What kind of crazy woman would like a man who tries to kill in common sense? But the Crown Prince had a look of complete ignorance in my answer. When did you? When I couldn't have been more puzzled. After a moment of poking my mouth, I shouted. That day, the birthday party of the second prince. In the maze garden, the Crown Prince tried to hit my neck with a knife. That's how much I had been struggling for days with all kinds of nightmares. If I didn't look like a sick girl with a bandage around my neck, would I have passed the Duke and Derek without much scolding? That's in my words. The Crown Prince had a rare bewildered expression. I didn't really mean to kill you. Don't be X. I couldn't spit it out with my mouth, and I looked at him with eyes that revealed my thoughts without filtration. When playing the game, I died so much in the maze garden that I couldn't proceed with the Crown Prince route. It was when I felt like a real dog. There was nothing noticeable, so I would pull the sword if anyone come. The prince, who did not know my thoughts, recited as an excuse. But didn't Princess stay alive because I got interested in the sound of Princess liking me? I'm so touched that my hands and feet tremble and my tears will drop. Your Highness, are you being sarcastic? There's no way. I turned my head in a curt reply. However, despite my attitude to cut off the conversation, the prince did not know that it was over. Then tell me why you fell in love with me. I already told you. Then I sighed deeply and murmured in a weary voice. Because of your Highness' good looks, your bravery, and your skills of the sword. Don't talk with insincere like that. You think I'm an eyeless idiot? The Crown Prince flashed red eyes at my insincere attitude. You make that face when you see me, and you want me to believe it now? What's wrong with my face? You look like you've chewed up dog poop. He saw it so well that I had nothing to say. Seeing me speechless, the prince persuaded me with a slightly muted voice. Tell me honestly, did anyone threaten to kill you if you didn't confess? I thought I'd rather do it. I don't know why I said such a rude thing at the time, but if he keep questioning me about the reason, what kind of answer should I say? I looked at the Crown Prince with eyes that almost shot me to death, and said anything with resignation. I liked your hair color. The Crown Prince's eyes grew slightly. What? When I saw your Highness at the banquet for your Highness' return. I managed to change the first meeting so as not to create a sense of incompatibility. Actually, the first time I saw the Crown Prince was during the second prince's birthday banquet. Therefore, the prince of the day was naturally pictured in my head. A tall man who proudly crossed the red carpet with a red cape flying. Your hair is shiny because it's reflected in the chandelier's light. It was like a golden powder floating around. Until I found the assassin he was dragging, I thought he was a real royal figure. The reality of the prince, who was only seen as an illustration, was shockingly noble and overwhelming. I let out the impression I had then. And your Highness' eyes looked like they had a ruby in them, so they looked like they were glamour. Glamour? The Crown Prince asked back with the amazing tone. Is that the reason you fell in love with me at first sight? People like they looked had some money. I didn't really fall in love at all, so instead of being positive, I answered moderately. I like jewelry, gold too, of course. Whether the much-awaited reason was absurd, the Crown Prince continued to blow in vain. You're so, the Crown Prince muttered to himself, looking at me with an unknown face. Weird woman, you're so weird. At the same time his head glistened favorability 29%. He said I'm weird, but why the favorability rise? But you're more weird, I asked sourly because I felt ungrateful. That's enough, right? I'm done talking, so don't ask me any more. The Crown Prince stared at me for a long time and laughed in vain and said with a chin, we have to get out of the woods as soon as dawns, so I'll go to bed. It seemed to me that he had a rough understanding of the reason I had made up. Good night, Your Highness. As if I had been waiting for the speak, I turned my back and lay down right away. I heard him kicking his tongue in the back, but I pretended not to hear it. Finally free, I closed my eyes with a light heart at the thought that I had finally escaped his obsession. As I was covering the Crown Prince's cloak, it occurred to me that he had to sleep in nothing but his trousers, but I did not care. It's none of my business. Even though I had fainted and woken up, I was very tired and exhausted. Today was really spectacular. How many things have happened since early in the morning. If I played the game this way every day, I thought I would die even before I got a good ending. No, I went to sleep with a torrent of ominous ideas. However, I couldn't sleep even after time passed. I closed my eyes and counted the number, imagining the amount spread out on the meadow. 9, 10, 11, 12. The more sheep I counted, the more I falling into the unconscious world. 11, 10, 9. The sheep that had sprung up on the meadow suddenly began to shrink. Because something huge ate each and every sheep that was farthest away. The sheep that roamed the lawn shrank at a rapid pace, finally eating all the sheep, and something huge came before me dripping with blood. It immediately raised its hand above me. The front paws are coming every minute. It's the one who cries with his mouth wide open to eat me. It was the head of a monster bear. I flapped my body and opened my eyes wide. The monster bear was nowhere to be found, even though it rolled the eye reflexively around. The sound of a burning bonfire. It was still in a dark cave. That's a relief. I rose from my seat with a shallow gasp. Then I made eye contact with a man who was searching for a campfire with a fire. Oh, aren't you sleeping, Your Highness? The Crown Prince, sitting in his seat earlier, looked at me with surprise for a moment. Then he answered curtly, it would be nice if we slept together and became a good beast's food. Yes. It was also a great ability to say that he was going to be on a night watch. I was dazed by the reliable appearance of an unexpected man. Then the prince suddenly opened his mouth. You can't sleep? What? Oh yeah, I couldn't bear to say that I had a nightmare and woke up, so I roughly equivocate. Judging from his unchanging posture or dark vision, he seemed to have fallen asleep for a short time. Even though I was completely awake, my head was still numb. It's cold. A chill suddenly struck me. The weak body and the fact that having body weight and fell into the river seemed to have had a very bad effect. I crouched down in front of the campfire with cape tightly folded. It was to enjoy the fire. The prince looked at me and raised one eyebrow and said nothing. But even sitting in front of the fire, the cold didn't go away. What's wrong with this? Far from getting better, my body trembled even when I felt it. I couldn't control myself. It was belatedly recognized that this was not only because of the cold. When I go back, do I have to take a sedative or something? I was originally dull of feeling and the after effects were so late. Just as if I could not control my trembling hands in front of winter after defeating the beasts the day before. The trauma of the situation that I was surprised to the extent that I didn't know, came like a aftermath now. In fact, it was a strange day that none of them were surprising. A bear wielding its front legs, a crown prince falling down by an arrow, and assassins who were closely chasing after him. Is it cold? I thought he wouldn't notice because I was covered in a cloak, but the crown prince immediately noticed my ideal. What? No, I denied. I didn't want to be informed of my condition like this. But the crown prince with a suspicious face has some firewood lying next to him in the bonfire. He put in more branches. The fire is even stronger, but still the tremors did not stop. That's a hassle too. At that moment the crown prince sprang up from his seat. The strong upper body, which had been hard to see due to the shadow of the fire, was revealed. What are you doing? I shrieked small and covered my eyes with both hands. Of course I had wide open his index finger to see what he was doing. The crown prince strode round the bonfire toward me. Don't do anything ridiculous and step aside. I was very embarrassed by his sudden behavior. Why, what's wrong with you? Wouldn't you get out of the way? He flung up his eyebrows and pressed fiercely. But when I didn't intend to move, he flung myself on the floor and pushed my body violently. Your Highness, I jumped up in a panic. It was to run away to the other side, which was originally his seat. But even I couldn't do it because he pulled the end of the cape I was wearing. With the terminal, I fell helplessly. My eyes were shut at the thought of falling on the hard floor. But where I fell, not on the cold cave floor, it was in the arms of the Crown Prince. I could feel the hot heat coming out of other people's bodies. The body was tight with only one layer of cape in between. What the hell is going on here? I hardened like a tree with my mouth wide open. What are you doing? Please let go. I came to my senses a step later and struggled to get out of his arms. But his forearm, which was strangling my back, did not budge. How rude! How dare you! To the Crown Prince of the Empire, he talked without changing a single face. Don't struggle and stay still. I'm not doing this because I like princesses. Then let go. What kind of molestation? I don't know what hard thoughts you had in your head, but get it off. My voice said him as a molester hardened the face as if the prince was displeased. When you are isolated from the battlefield, it is most important to maintain the temperature of your friends among the battlefields. We often feel the cold, but we usually run a few hours apart. I paused at the remark. The reason why he suddenly came and hugged me was quite reasonable. Looking at the face again, the way he looked at me as if he was really unwilling to do it seemed so uncomfortable. He almost killed me not long ago, so no matter how much it's a game, it can't be the happening like that. If it were a normal mode FL, I wouldn't know. There was not the slightest chance that such a strange air would bloom between me and the Crown Prince. No, but I'm the one who suddenly got humiliated. But why does he make a face that he hates more? He looked strangely offended, saying I understand his behavior, but reluctantly. I grumbled in a sulky voice, this isn't a battlefield. Then you can hold out and die of hypothermia. An hour later, I shoved my mouth hard at the curse. Otherwise, he seemed to say something that would be worth cutting off the 29% he had barely put up. The silence fell again in the cave where the Crown Prince and I had once passed. It was when he was staring at the wall advisor over the campfire, awkwardly holding myself in his arms. Why do you keep shaking like a dog? He asked. I don't understand, narrowing the gap between my eyes. At the same time, the arms around the waist were also hard-pressed. The vibration seemed to have been transmitted with a touching body to the shame of the body to avoid showing as much as possible. What a shiver! I distorted my face by his poor choice of language. But I didn't have the energy to get angry, so I replied helplessly, not just because it's cold. Then? The prince inquired quickly. I tried to gloss over it, but it didn't work for a man of extraordinary tenacity. I held and rubbed the cold hands trembling intermittently under the Crown Prince's large cape, and tried to pretend nothing was wrong. When I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about what happened earlier. What happened earlier? The Crown Prince frowned and said, to see if he thought of something soon. When you fall off the cliff? I thought you were fainting as soon we fell. Look like that's not. Or you mean when you almost got hit by a bear while coming forward without fear? Yes, now I'm tired of reacting to everything. I trembled like a dog because I come forward without fear and almost got hit by the bear. I muttered in a voice that was beyond measure for a person who was shaking with fear. With a deep sigh and an exaggerated admission, there was no further noise from the Crown Prince. I thought you'd say, crazy dog ever does that? I thought you'd be sarcastic, unexpected. In the cozy cave where the bonfire rose, peace and sleep came. Certainly, as I talked to the Crown Prince and gradually came to my senses, the cold and trembling that had been severe to the end of my head gradually subsided. However, as if replacing the position, a heavy fatigue came. I leaned my head against the thick forearms around my ears. He hugged me first without my consent, so he should at least play the role of a pillow. It was around the time when only the eyelids were slowly blinking. When I was a kid, suddenly a sigh of voice came from the bedside. I was too lazy to turn my head, so I only turned my eyes and checked. The prince looked down at me with a subtle look and then opened his mouth again. I think I was about 9 or 10. I've encountered a bear about the same size that a princess encountered today in this forest. The bear? Yes, I wondered why he brought up such a story out of the blue, but I heard his story quietly. There was once a time when the second prince's birthday overlapped with a hunting contest, When I first saw my brother, the Crown Prince's eyes became a little dim as he recalled that time. The figure made him feel a little bit human. But it was a snap. Callisto immediately twisted his lips and put on a fierce look. As a kid, I thought I could harm a newborn baby, so I couldn't see a single hair because the queen had been wrapped up for years. All the nobles gathered to attend the hunting competition, but it was only nominal. Gifts for the second prince were lined up throughout the tournament. I was the only one who took part in the position empty-handed. His muttering face suddenly became hollow. Looking back, he looked a little disappointed. I wanted to give my one and only brother a nice present. So in spite of the opposition of the father, I sneaked into the hunting ground with a bow. I was going to catch a little animal like a rabbit and give it to him as a gift. Callisto soon recovered his spirits, as if he had felt despondent. His face, smiling back at me, was so mischievous. I can't believe he had such a naive and sad time. Somehow the fact seemed quite strange. I looked strangely at the Crown Prince, who told me a story. In any case, I was so busy dying that I lacked much information about the ML in his hard mode. In order to survive in the future, it was better to pick up anything and use it. Therefore, I carefully engraved the childhood that Crown Prince confided in me. I did find prey that I liked, but it ran away so quickly that the arrow didn't hit it. I was chasing after the prey and unwittingly came into the deep woods and ran into a bear. I was a little surprised. It was a very similar story to what I had today. The Crown Prince, who noticed my interest, continued his words without a break. I couldn't even shoot an arrow at the bear running, unlike the princess. I was horribly scared. I just managed to escape just before I got hit by its front foot. You ran into it when you was a lot younger than I am now, right? To the self-contradictory tone of Callisto, I blinked my eyes and answered back. Ahead of the coming-of-age ceremony, I'm also shaking because the fear of meeting a bear is still lingering. Only 9-10 years old, what was the fear of the Crown Prince, who would have faced a huge beast at that young age? It happened to be a comforting aspect, but Callisto shook his head firmly. Age doesn't matter to the heir of the throne. The emperor must always be flawless. But in addition, I did not avoid it completely, but stupidly his claws brushed against my arms. If it were a little later, it wouldn't have stopped at tearing, but this arm would have been blown away. I was lucky. I was fed up with the cruel description of my left arm. The Crown Prince drew the corners of his mouth as if it was funny to see me like that. I'm running away, frantically avoiding the monster that's chased, and suddenly an arrow came from the other side. Are the guards there? I thought so at first. The Crown Prince suddenly narrowed the middle of his forehead. On the way, I ran to a dying lion, and the assassins in black suit shot me with a bow. Assassin? They sent to kill a 10-year-old child. I opened my mouth to his calm explanation. If you were the Crown Prince, you wouldn't know? Is it really normal to release dozens of assassins on the hunting ground to kill a child? 20 assassins encountered today came to mind. It's something you're going through often. Somehow, suddenly facing the assassin in the middle of the hunting ground, the Crown Prince was surprisingly calm and cool. The tyrant's childhood, which had not been detailed in the game, was worse than expected. Who sent it? Well, in the end, the investigation ended in smoke, and it wasn't clear who was responsible for the assassination, but he stroked his chin with one hand and suddenly his red eyes flashed. It must have been sent by the Empress or a foreign country without having to disclose it. The second prince was a poor kid who couldn't even write properly at that time. I could not feel a handful of affection in the voice of calling the one and only brother. I was suddenly worried. But the story right now, can you tell this to me? What wrong with that? It's not like you're going to come the second prince and joining him. Even so, I don't know what useful from the story. I was angry, but he was right. But why are my fists clenching up? Since he was a child, he had his personality destroyed once again. I was deeply convinced by the formation of his character, and sent a look of hastening the story. So anyway, I'm running away from the bear towards the assassins who came to kill me, and suddenly I was hit in the chest by the bow they shot and fell to the slope. Chest? Yes, fortunately I didn't die because of my mother's belongings I had on my neck. I looked reflexively down and looked around Callisto's neck. But not to mention the belonging, they were only hard bare chests without a piece of cloth. I didn't use it now. I couldn't use it after that, so I kept it separately. The Crown Prince laughed and mocked. Are you done with seeing appearances? His face glowed belatedly. I turned my head hurriedly, coughing in vain. So, what happened next? What about the bear that chasing? When I tried to turn the topic around, the Crown Prince was picky, sneaky, and gentle. It's funny, but surprisingly, thanks to the fall down the slope, the bear I was chasing passed over me and ran to the assassins. He wrenched the corners of his mouth up again as if he thought of that time. It was a bloody fight. The bear was very intelligent. He fought well against 10 men with weapons. Somewhere the bear's howling sounded a giant monster bear that's going crazy. The image of a young prince watching the assassins being swept away by the bear's wielding feet was depicted. So who won? The Crown Prince answered immediately with a blank face. Both have been wiped out. Both the assassins were outnumbered, but they didn't have close-range weapons to minimize the trace. On the contrary, the bear swept them away and won, but the poison on the arrows spread and eventually died. After all, it was only the young prince who survived the scene of the great slaughter. I survived, and what do you think I did next? This time the Crown Prince suddenly asked me a question. My lips were chapped, and I couldn't answer anything. What did you do? If it were me, I would have fled desperately by the time the bears and assassins clashed, and had already escaped the forest. I cut off the dead bear's neck. However, the young prince, who heard through the mouth of the person concerned, committed an unexpected act, and proudly won the hunt. After the ceremony, the head of the bear that I brought with me was thrown into a pile of second prince's birthday presents. It was quite a spectacle to see the blood that hasn't cooled down yet. When I heard the end of the story, I was dumbfounded. What kind of accident could cut the dead bear's neck off on the spot? The well-went story suddenly met a strong storm and seemed to have turned away. The Crown Prince laughed at me, perhaps because I was silent and thought I was shocked. But isn't the princess so brave? Unlike me, an opportunist, you were dealing with a bear there yourself. Before I knew it, he had returned to his usual form. Looking at the prince's face full of gruesome smiles, perhaps he wasn't mocking me, but mocking himself. In those days, your crossbow skills are more than I thought. Even some of the most skilled hunters would not behave as calmly as you would if they suddenly encountered a bear. If he ran away with his back, he would soon have caught up with the bear and torn his limbs. So put aside your useless thoughts and be proud of your intuition and your ability to cope. It was an unexpected consolation. I stared at Callisto with my eyes wide open. Is it because of a similar situation? Despite his blunt and heartless words, I calmed down. At the same time, it was ironic that the person who said such a thing was the Crown Prince, not anyone else. Thanks for the compliment. After quite a long time, I managed to open my mouth and answer awkwardly. You were very courageous at a young age too, and I returned the compliment in my own way. There was nothing else to say about the story told by the Crown Prince. I felt sorry for his childhood, but it was only for a moment. The thought of the dead bear's head was reversed when he said he had won the game. This guy's already fed up since then. At that moment, the prince's face was frowned upon as to what he didn't like, even though I complimented him. Is that it? What I asked back in bewilderment. The Crown Prince's brow bone deepened. Your appreciation of my story? Yes, that's it. Didn't Princess have any feelings? Yes, I was dumbfounded by the sudden disdain. Then the Crown Prince glared at me with red eyes and spat out. How can you be so mean? When I opened my eyes as if I had heard something unfamiliar. Is he in a position to say that to me while I was just poking my lips in amazement? He retorted that I was even more offended. When I told this story to the shivering soldiers on the battlefield, they cried and wept. Doesn't the princess feel pity to me as a child? I just laughed in vain when the man said what he was dissatisfied with. Not pitiful at all. Which part should I pity? I was the most pitiful and pathetic in this fucking game. At least the Crown Prince won't be servile, fearing that he will lose the favor of a man who hates him. Toward the red pupil staring at me as if waiting for an answer, I said it all moderately round. You're well alive now anyway. A sad story is originally completed by death. How I'm struggling to avoid that sad ending. This, guys, you won't even know if you wake up. At my answer, he clicked his tongue and murmured, as it turns out she's a villain with no blood or tears. Who's going to say? Even the rest of the other males couldn't stand this son of bitch. The anger, which was about to burst, was lost right in the enemy's interesting glow of anger. I took a deep breath and engraved my patience. Damn bastard, he was gazing at me with his mouth shut, and rehashing his bosom with his eyes. He suddenly let go of his fierce look and blew his wind. When I'm with a princess, I really can't get bored, and favorability 34%. His good feeling rose with a faint smile on his face. I slowly opened my eyes wide. 5%. It was a pretty big jump. I stared blankly over his golden head. The basic favor given in normal mode also exceeded 30%. Now the prince's favorability has reached a level that can be said to be quite distant from death. But it didn't feel real. Maybe it's because I'm relieved. Seeing the face of a man smiling at me just made me feel weird. The tremor has stopped at that time. The chain that was squeezing the back of his back was loosened. Unlike when he hugged me first, Callisto let me go with a very careful touch. Now really go to bed. He rose from his seat and returned to the other side of the campfire without hesitation. The warmth surrounding me quickly faded away. As he said, it was after the tremors that had taken over the body had really subsided. Father, have you come back? The Duke of Eckhart, who was nervously tapping the table, was delighted to see his eldest son, who had just entered the cabana, but Derek shook his head and frowned. Still not? Leonard took the hounds back into the woods. We'll hear from him soon. The last man see her? I found an article who answered the question of the way to the small animal hunting ground. So did she go that way? Derek nodded quietly this time. Boom! The Duke struck the table with his fist as if he were frustrated. It's all over now, but a girl who hasn't reached her age is going to be alone in the forest. She said she'd look around the hunting ground, but I didn't really think so. Penelope was originally fickle. Even so, the small animal hunting area was not too far from the open space where the hunting competition was organized. No matter what happens, the guards who were stationed there can find it soon enough. The problem was into the deep woods. The predators had been released. The Duke asked, pressing down on the sore temples. The Crown Prince's sighed at that moment. Derek's forehead wriggled faintly. The Duke never saw his son's mouth, firming his head hard. The Imperial Palace has just dispatched a search party. At a time like this, not the only princess disappeared. Even though it was long after the wake-up call to announce that it was time to gather, the Crown Prince also did not return. I've asked them to let me know if they find her, so all we have to do is wait. No way that son of a bitch cut Penelope off again and dragged her somewhere. Father, Derek stopped the Duke. There's a lot here, nor did he not think so. However, this was not the only area of Eckhart but the center of the hunting festival, where all kinds of aristocrats gathered. It was unclear who had planted their ears. Leonard, who was on the first search, saw something strange. Derek recited in a lower voice. There was a dead body of a brown bear that had been decapitated in a gold-marked area where the beast was released. The body of the bear? On serious matters, the Duke killed his voice. Yes, but strangely enough, he said, the severed head was lying far away from his body. Well, and his body was covered with tanned hair in a round bead shape. What a round bead shape! No doubt it was a bolt from the crossbow given to Penelope. The Duke, who noticed what Derek was saying, opened his mouth wide. Maybe the bear attacked a human being. I assure you there was no sign of that. Derek flatly denied it. The Duke was relieved of his anxiety. It was fortunate. So, how did you deal with the bear's body? Ellen's servants arrived first and were collecting them, so I had no choice but to back down after checking the body. Eileen Hooper? The Duke's dark eyebrows wriggled over the unexpected name. Then did Marquis Ellen catch the bear? There's no way. I'm sure it's a ferocious improvement on the stench of the Crown Prince. Well, an old man who can't even shoot a bow can't catch a bear. On top of that, I would have brought the cut hair back. But Marquis Ellen only had 2 roe deer, and there was no head of a giant beast anywhere. I have no idea what's going on, the Duke murmured, sighing deeply as if the barrel was in pain. Penelope, why did she go all the way to the area where the beast was released? I shouldn't have given her that crossbow back. Father. Derek, who was listening to his murmur silently, asked abruptly. The crossbow you gave Penelope, what magic did you engrave? What kind of magic did you engrave that made her shoot bears? The Duke turned his head in vain to see if the changed subject was uncomfortable. Derek's eyes faded as he looked at his father. No way is it killing weapon. Did you cheat on the mana? It's not for killing, it's not like that. The Duke swung his head and added bluntly. It's only a moment's fainting when you get hit. It's suitable for hunting, so it'd pass the security check. Is that really all? Derek was a sharp guy. The Duke fell to the sight of his first son, who did not easily fall for it. There, I've put on an extra magic trick to lose the memory before being hit. Derek's expressionless face was distorted for a while. There was silence in the tent. Derek only spoke a long time later. Why did you give her that? The Duke answered calmly, glancing sideways at his son. If anyone wants to shoot someone, I'll told her take him, and give him a sneak shot. You know her personality. Why did you give her such a dangerous thing in her hand? As if to stifle anger, Derek's voice sank even further. And then, like last year, she will go around wildly and try to shoot people. If a person who is hit by a crossbow and loses memory comes out thrilled, what are you going to do? Don't get ahead, said the Duke, kicking his tongue as an excuse. I'm just preparing for the end of the bargain. I've been through enough. I know she'll be careful. Even Countess Kellen is not enough. This time, do you intend to hand over all the remaining mines to the nobles? Derek Eckhart. The Duke decisively cut off Derek. It was a great loss for Eckhart to hand over a whole diamond mine to Count Kellen, who was struggling with Penelope's violence to the end. But a princess who was officially registered as the family member. How can we be so ignorant, and just let a child be imprisoned for what she did? Stop. If I should give it, then I'll give it. Aren't you dying because of the miscellaneous things that have happened in the house these days? Father, Derek raised his voice out of proportion, the jaw with the teeth clenched up. For that reason, a crossbow engraved with magic. After Mrs. Donna, you seem to have a big heartache because of her work at the ballroom. The Duke abruptly cut off Derek's retort. I hear that the slaves strangled the knight because he spoke ill of Penelope in public. Did you know that? That's Derek's mouth shut. He heard it late and knew. That's why he went to the military base after being told by his butler that she had gone to practice crossbow. To tell her the news that he had dismissed the profane man who dared to insult the princess. But when I saw him shooting the crossbow half touched by a slave cub, his eyes were turned upside down. After all, he couldn't deliver anything he wanted to tell her. She'd rather be self-assured after being cursed and come back. So would I scold a kid who didn't want to attend a hunting competition? What would I do? So I comforted her by giving her a crossbow. 'Cause I can't let her just stay at home forever? Derek was silent for a moment at the words of the Duke that followed. I fired Mark and his gang right away. A long time later, he opened his mouth in a cool voice. It would have been easy if she told Father or me, I mean the butler. But it's her who makes us run into the worst situation every time. Derek, the words that had not been said were lost at the call of the Duke. Don't hate her too much. It's all my fault in a way that Penelope has become such a nuisance. I brought her here to satisfy my greed and didn't take care of her properly. She seemed to be growing up now, so take care of yourself. Isn't she the only younger sister? Derek broke the Duke's last word and clenched his fist. I have only Yvonne. The sound of a clenched mouth came through the hard frozen lips. The Duke looked at him like that and sighed and turned his head. Now let go of Yvonne, Father. He flipped around the Duke with a face that he couldn't believe what he had just heard. How can you say that? For Yvonne, and it's their biological father, not anyone. It was an inevitable accident to lose the Yvonne, but the Duke did not stop. I haven't stopped looking for it once, but not even the witness showed up. It's time to admit it that she is no longer in this world. Father, it's already been 6 years since Penelope came as a duchess. The Duke's gaze at his distorted son's face filled with anguish. It is true that I have brought her here without asking your opinions, and I have left you alone without caring what has happened to our family. But how long will you let go of the guilt of Yvonne by harassing and hating her? Derek's blue pupil fluttered at the remark. I'd rather have turned off my nerves. Never thought of it. If it were Leonard, he wouldn't be doing something childish to the girl who lost her sister and took her place. Derek answered in a tight voice. I have never hated and harassed Penelope, Father. The only reason I hated Penelope was because of her knuckles and frowning behavior. So these days, when she had become so human, there's nothing I can hate. That's why I didn't show much of that. It was the moment. No, little Duke, a dry voice flashed past his ear. Did Emily ask you to do this, little Duke? Whatever punishment you give me, I'll take it, little Duke. The kid who had been calling himself brother all the time, began to call himself the little Duke. Although they remained in front of others, they distinguished themselves thoroughly when they were alone. I was so annoyed that every time she called me brother I was disgusted. I will live like a rat so you don't have to worrying about it all the time. Now she was busy drawing a line, stiffening her face coldly when she saw him. Derek was shocked by the realization, but rather she hated me. It was the moment when he opened his mouth to speak with a slightly puzzled look. Bang, father! The door of the cabana opened roughly in between Leonard rushed and Leonard. There's a witness who saw Penelope. The Duke and Derek were dazzled by Leonard's words, which he poured out like a rapid fire. What? Who is that? The Baron Tullet. The Baron Tullet. He's the fiancé of Lady Kellen. Instead of the Duke, that brought back a faint memory, Derek spewed out quickly. He was such a humble man that the Duke could not easily think of. He managed to win the title by lining up to the Queen by the distant scheme of the Marquis of Ellen. Earlier this year, however, the sudden engagement of the Baron and the Countess was a great sensation in society. Rumors circulated in the daily that the two families, who only have daughters, might have forged a forced union by mobilizing distant relatives for the alliance. Both families made sense because they were allies of the second prince. So Baron Tullet, where the hell did he see Penelope? The Duke urged Leonard in an urgent voice. Said Leonard, hesitating to open his mouth for a moment with a subtle look. He was knocked out in the woods by Penelope's crossbow. What? It is said that he was looking a goddess of hunting from the moment she was discovered, shedding saliva like an idiot, and continuing to wear a crimson hair. The Duke could not speak and opened his mouth, but that wasn't the end. In addition, there are a number of aristocrats who are believed to have lost their minds and woken up. What Derek was worried about happened. I suddenly woke up with a sudden sense of clarity. As if it were early dawn, the cave was filled with green dawns. The bonfire, which had been burning all night, had already been extinguished with only acrid smoke rising. Beyond that, Callisto was seen sleeping, leaning against the wall. I need to get dressed up while he's sleeping. Under the cape was still naked, so the feeble wind blowing into the cave felt cooler. I got up from my seat, trying not to make a sound. Fortunately, the clothes hung near the bonfire were dried up. It was when I pick up the clothes before the Crown Prince wake up. A cool wind blew with a dreary vibration like a nebula. My bangs shook gently in the wind as I buttoned my jacket. I hesitated with the sense of incompatibility I felt before I woke up. The wind not from the outside but from the inside of the cave. I stared at the other side of the dark cave with my breath. At that moment the wind blew me back. It wasn't an illusion. A really cool wind is blowing from inside the cave. Is there a hole in the other side of the cave? If you can feel the wind blowing from the other side up to here, it means that the cave is short and straight. But all that unfolded before me was the black darkness. The cave, in which even a faint light could be seen, did not look short at all in length. Then a wind accompanied by the nebula blew again from the other side of the cave. I turned and quickly approached the Crown Prince. Your Highness, wake up. Deep asleep. He didn't wake up right away. I was reluctant to catch him because he was bare, but I had no choice but to grab him by the shoulder and shake him. Your Highness, Callisto. However, he did not open his eyes. Suddenly it occurred to me that his skin on the palm of his hand was appallingly cold. Is it because you gave me a cape and slept naked all night? In addition, the prince of last night was wearing wet pants, perhaps for his own consideration. Your Highness, Your Highness? The sight of Callisto, who couldn't open his eyes even after shaking several more times, made me suddenly scared. Suddenly it occurred to me that he was hit by a citation and a sword yesterday. Is he dead? I rushed my head to his chest. Fortunately, his heart was beating regularly as if he weren't dead. With my hair pulled off, I still slapped the Crown Prince lightly to wake him up. I can't help it, cause he won't wake up. Your Highness, open your eyes. The touch, which was close to a slight tap, grew stronger and stronger and stronger. I didn't do this because I was selfish. I really couldn't help it. Because the Crown Prince did not open his eyes after a slight tap. Your Highness, Your Highness. At last the sound of a proper slap on the cheek rang out in the cave. The Crown Prince frowned, his eyelids flinched, and soon his red pupil was revealed between them. Your Highness, are you all right? Are you sick? I asked with a worried look, hastily hiding my hand that had been raised to grind one more time. Princess, yes, your highness. Didn't you just hit me on the cheek? What, that's impossible, how dare I do that? I shook my head with my eyes wide open, my gaze was nailed in one cheek of the game. That's odd, I felt like I was hit on the cheek, you must have had a dream, get up quickly. I jumped up before he noticed, and brought him his clothes and his lightweight armor. It was a bit of conscience, this is not the time to talk about dreams in peace, your highness, the wind is blowing from inside the cave. Wind, yes, I'm sure it's not even a short burrow. At that moment another cool breeze blew from inside the cave as if to support my words. The prince, wearing the clothes he had received from me, hesitated and looked over the cave. This is his face stiffened. Why, what's wrong? I can feel the magic. He made eye contact with me with a serious look on his face. It looks like there's someone in the cave. I blinked at an unexpected remark. Who's there? It was more surprising that the crown prince noticed it than that there might be someone on the other side of the cave. He's like a ghost, unlike Callisto, whose eyes glare. I didn't really worry much. Because if a dangerous episode was in progress, the fucking system window would have told me first. However, it didn't matter if it was an unexpected situation that really went out of the story. The crown prince, who will not die anyway, will cut them all with a sword. I need to check it out. Dressed up to his cape, the crown prince rose from his seat with the sword next to him. It was the moment he staggered with a sudden short groan. Your highness. This time I was so startled that I grabbed the crown prince's arm and helped him. Looking back, he didn't look very well. Your highness, are you really ill? Please sit down again. No, it's okay, I'm just a little dizzy. Isn't there something wrong with where you got hurt yesterday? You look so pale. The prince suddenly burst into laughter at my worried voice. Why, you slapped me on the cheek and you look like you're about to dance when I died. Did you know? If it were near the palace, you would have been taken to an underground prison as an imperial assassin. An imperial assassin? I jumped and denied. It's an inevitable choice to wake you up, your high. At that time another cool breeze with vibrations came from inside the cave. As if to prevent my embarrassing excuse, I paused. The crown prince, looking beyond the cave with sharp eyes, began to move quickly as the wind stopped. As he approached the seat of a dead bonfire, he stroked the flint a few times and made a good fire. And the longest, thickest piece of whatever brought for firewood was moved to light. Soon a torch was born. What are you doing? You stay here, I'll be right back. Your highness. I grabbed a torch and hurriedly grabbed the crown prince's cape, trying to move a step into the dark cave. Does it have to be checked now? The crown prince's eyebrows wriggled. What does that mean? It might be dangerous. We'd better get out of the forest first, and then bring the guards to check it out. It was the moment a clear square window appeared over the dark, covered with slacks behind the crown prince. Hidden quest: explore suspicious cave. Compensation: something unknown, accept decline. I looked at it blankly. If a dangerous episode was just going on, the fucking system window would have told me first. The idea of it has simply become a seed. It was creepy. What if it disappears before that? The crown prince replied, looking back to see if I was strange because I suddenly stopped talking. In the imperial palace no one can use magic except a wizard woven with an oath. The principle of dissonance is summary disposal. I don't think there's a lot of people, given that they don't have much manpower. I'll be right back after I kill them, so wait. He pulled a sword and acted as if he would run right away. I couldn't even think about it. Then I'm coming with you. With tears in my eyes I pressed accept. I want to press refuse, but I couldn't help it. If something happens after spending the crown prince alone for no reason, I may have any effect on his favorability. Furthermore, the rewards of the hidden quest which has been completed so far were all helpful. When you look back, you've run out of beads, haven't you, princess? The crown prince spoke crookedly as he looked at me, holding up the crossbow that lay on the floor. It sounded as if I had no crossbow. I had nothing. Two are better than alone, isn't it? I think it'll only be a burden. Don't worry now, I don't have a sullen bead, so I'll run away on my own even if I encounter an assassin. I can't say anything about being so grave. Does Eckhart teach such manners to the royal family? The crown prince kicked his tongue with a look as if he were looking at a child without a fuss. You started it first, I answered irritably in my mind, and it was when I stretched out my waist to pick up the crossbow. Something glistening suddenly caught my eye. There were strange weapons next to the place where the crossbow was placed. It was a bloody arrows and dagger. This is... I immediately noticed that it was the weapons that were lodged in the Crown Prince's body yesterday. Ironically, however, it was not the day of sharp commendation but the rough dagger handle. Why is this? As I approached it as if it wanted me to pick it up, the twinkling speed increased. I picked up the dagger with a puzzled look at the same time. Reward-shaped dagger has been acquired. I was dumbfounded by the sudden rise of the system window. So this is the assassin badge? It was when I was looking down at the dagger with a suspicious face. How long are you going to sit there? If you don't want to go, tell me then, the Crown Prince urged nervously. Go, let's go, you're in a hurry. I hurried up to the Crown Prince with my dagger. Why are you bringing that? I can't use the crossbow, so I'm going to use it for self-defense. Do you know how to do swordsmanship? The Crown Prince gave a look of surprise. Of course, I didn't know I would do it, but I didn't express. Now let's going in now. I went on a suspicious cave quest with the Crown Prince. The more we enter the cave, the narrower it becomes and the more winding it becomes. And occasionally damp from the water falling from the ceiling, the strength of the wind from somewhere also gradually increased. Another blow shook the torch. With Callisto there must be something. I forced myself to take a reluctant step. The creepy earbuds made my hair stand on end. Every time I had some regrets about accepting the quest, I looked up over the Crown Prince's head with earnest eyes. I hope everything's okay for me. It was more frightening to see a plunge in favor than in the deafening. It was when I walked for a long time along the winding cave path. Suddenly, the prince who was walking ahead stopped walking. Princess, look over there. As I turned my eyes in the direction he pointed, I could see a faint light leaking from a distance. There he is. Mana feels stronger than before. At that moment, surely a stronger wind blew than before. The torch, which was barely hanging, crawled out. The narrow cave was quickly darkened. At the same time as the wind stopped, even the light that had been leaking from afar disappeared. It was a mystery. Go over there, come on. I was in a hurry to break the quest. I wanted to run in a hurry, but no one could outrun the Crown Prince because the cave was so narrow that it was too heavy. I pushed him on the back and urged him violently. What about princesses? The Crown Prince pushed by me, re-walked with a wry voice. Are you really a noble lady? What does that mean? Usually at times like this other young ladies would scream and jump into my arms. I knew what he was talking about, so I snorted, wake up. Unfortunately, the road is too narrow, Your Highness. I won't forget to hug you next time we're on the spacious side of the boulevard. I'm looking forward to it, the Crown Prince replied with a sneer. There's no expectation, and once we get out of the forest I'll never be alone with yourself. I was walking in the footsteps of the Crown Prince with such thoughts. At last we were able to reach the source of the light leaking out. It was a much narrower gap than the width of the cave. The wall is sharp, so be careful not to get swept away. The Crown Prince struggled to squeeze himself into the gap. Smaller than him, I was able to get through easier than I thought. When I came out of the gap, the prince was underneath. Should I jump? He reached out to me in dismay. Hold me. I looked at it for a moment with a feeling of surprise and soon reached out my hand. A strong force supported my weight. With his help I had easily settled on the floor. A sudden burst of intense blue light from the front, and there was an unprecedented gust of wind. I closed my eyes reflexively. The hair tied together flew like it was going to loose. Fortunately, the gust quickly died down. I opened my eyes dimly. It was after the blue light had disappeared. The Crown Prince went forward without saying a word. I looked around and followed slowly. It was quite a spacious space, unlike the passage that had just walked. However, as if it were an artificially created space, not a naturally formed cave, a round flat platform rose in the middle of the pavilion as if it were a huge rock. The height was well over the height of most men, so I could not see what was beyond it. The Crown Prince stepped well on the rough rocks and quickly climbed onto the platform. It was when I struggled to stand beside him, following where he had stepped. I opened my eyes at the sight ahead. This is surprisingly, a skeleton without a lower body stood upright in the center of the flattened rock. There was an unknown large scroll in both hands, as if to hurl a hurrah. At that moment the blue light began to rise around the body. With the blinding blush ahead there was an unparalleled gust of wind. Having managed to climb to the end of the rock along Callisto, I stumbled, unable to hold my balance in a moment in the rush. It was then a sense of dizziness hit the whole body. Careful, a strong force gripped the wrist. The Crown Prince stood firm and held me steady, As if there was no blow in the wind, it was when I held my flying head with one hand and opened my eyes with difficulty. This is a large circle formed around the body. A complex pattern began to be painted like someone who was invisible in it, and soon a blue light exploded over it. Like a swaying fire, an unknown intangible force swirled frantically around the corpse. Strong gusts seemed to be caused by it. A ragged strip of cloth hung over the remains, fluttered roughly. Magic Circle, the Crown Prince, watching silently, spat out its identity. Magic Circle. It was when I was looking at a pattern of blank blue at an unfamiliar sound. It was not long before the wind stopped. Even the intangible power gradually reduced the range, and soon disappeared without breeze along with the pattern. The tumultuous cave had subsided again. There was a disturbing element in the Imperial Palace that used magic without permission. It was already long ago I let go of his wrists that I had held tightly so that the Crown Prince wouldn't be pushed out. As he said, the condition of the remains standing in the middle of the disappeared magic circle seemed to be incredibly old at a glance. Is it magic preserved? The cave was damp inside, so the remains that old as that usually melted and could not maintain shape. Moreover, it was amazing that even a normal person could stand upright like that in a stormy environment. Why is it gone under the waist? Sometimes there were mummies found standing upright, but that was possible because the skin and muscles of the lower body were preserved. But the remains in front of me could not be called mummies at all. The shape of the ribs and the severed vertebrae looked just before they were fused to the rock. Did the stone water impregnate the molten remains? I was observing the remains with interesting eyes. The shape is still maintained because of the remaining mana. What? It looks like he used his body as a sacrifice for the magic circle to tie the spirit to this place. Suddenly the Crown Prince answered with open mouth. Only then did I realize that I mumbled out a question. How many times have you seen a skull gourd? Seeing that, you're not surprised. He was staring at me with interesting eyes, observing the remains interestingly. Usually they replace them with animals, but the author seems to have died halfway through the magical cast and couldn't survive. The body half split. I was astonished. A step later Callisto raised his head and answered with a sour look. When you cast a magic team, you need to supply strong vitality. Strong vitality? It's the magic team's invocation and vitality, and I don't know a thing like that. What, this didn't come out in normal mode? Besides, I was very embarrassed because it was a completely different answer from the direction I was guessing. It's not some fantasy movie. How the hell do you tie up your soul? But I was convinced right away this is not a reality, but a world of games where magic is practiced in real life. Why would he want to tie his soul to this place? I guess he was trying to keep this magic crew on the line after he died. What magic he tried to cast, it's very damn strong. Callisto added with a frown to the palace. I'm glad this bastard died in the middle. I nodded in agreement with the remark. It was quite appalling to try to secretly practice magic deep in the woods inside the Imperial Palace. The Crown Prince slowly walked along where the circular border of the magic circle carved to check the condition of the remains. The spirit that he was trying to tie up is gone, and it seems that only the mana in the body remains, and it's stuck in the magic circle. It's still enough to trigger a magic cruise, so he must have been the one who did it in his life. Approximately, I understood it as a sound that the remains could be preserved as much as they were because there was still some mana left. With only one mana, without all the chemicals, we can preserve the remains. What an amazing and convenient world it was then. Another blue light began to be clearly drawn on the rock with a faint vibration. The magic circle seemed to be reactivating. Stay back for a while, princess, it's dangerous. Callisto stretched out his arm at me and ordered me to back off. I stepped back steadily down. The magical power left on the body began to fluctuate by the magic circle. The prince who pulled the sword relentlessly lowered the sword over the intangible vortex. A loud rupture resounded through the cave. The enchanted power and the sword that tried to cut it were smashed, and a lustful blonde blew up without a blow due to the relentless wind. But apparently not bothered at all, the Crown Prince flashed his red eyes toward the air. With his sword in the floor, a blue spark splashed around him. Soon after, cracks began to appear on the rock, as soon as he began to bloom his sword. The fine thread soon became a deep crevice and spread through the entire magic circle. The rough wind gradually died down with him frantically. The fluctuating mana and magic circle disappeared at some point. The Crown Prince pulled out the sword from the flower. It was quite a bit of power, and there was a cold sweat on his forehead. "Is it done, Your Highness?" I asked, lowering my hand, which was closing my ears because of the roar. "I completely destroyed it," Callisto answered with an insincere nod. "Now let's see what magic he was trying to do." With the sword in his hand, he walked aimlessly across the cracked rock. It was the thin arm of the remains, each holding a thick scroll. After stopping in front of it, and stroking his chin for a moment, he suddenly grabbed the sword he was holding. He was ready to chop up the remains. Only then did I notice what he was going to do, so I cried with my eyes wide open. "Your Highness!" Callisto paused and looked back at me. I rushed to where he was. "What are you doing now?" "I'll cut the arm." Why? Looking at the scroll will give us a clue as to why he's been trying to carve a magic ring inside the palace. "You don't have to take it out while damaging the remains." The Crown Prince wriggled his eyebrows as if he couldn't understand what I said. "Then will the princess touch the body and give it to me?" "Yes, what? I'll get it out." I nodded quickly. "That's great. In fact, it was one of the things I wanted to do." Furthermore, the sword wielded by the Crown Prince could not immediately bring the remains to a collapse. The remains were preserved for a long time in an unusual form. "Stay back for a moment, Your Highness, especially put that sword away." I slipped a dangerous prince back. The Crown Prince burst out laughing as if he were dumbfounded. But he simply grabbed the sword into the sheath. The crooked look seemed like, "Let's see what you're doing." I confirmed that he had completely retreated and stood in front of the remains. Then I gathered my hands together and gave a short, silent salute. "I'm sorry, can I touch you?" Archaeologists have the most tension when excavating human bones or tombs. It's unbelievable, but there are more supernatural phenomena than you think. Therefore, there have often been cases where a ritual was held or prayed before the excavation work began. "What are you doing?" It was just after the silent tribute to the remains. The prince, who had stepped back, was standing close by and looking down at me as if I had a toothache. "I'm setting some salute because I'm touching the bones." "Why would you do that?" "To pray for the repose of the deceased and to pray that the removal of his belongings will not cause any harm." "You're doing all sorts of useless things." The Crown Prince glared at me with a strange glance and narrowed the space between his eyes. I didn't know the princess would be so superstitious. I immediately ignored his sarcasm. A conditioned investigation was needed before the excavation. I leaned down and looked closely at the scroll and the knuckles holding it. The paper and bone of the scroll had rotted away, perhaps because they died holding onto it. There was a thick layer of dirt and sand around it. "Is there a brush or something?" There could not have been such a thing in this desolate cave. As I was looking around and looking for tools, I had a flash of ideas in my head. I put down the crossbow I was holding on the floor and took the dagger I had brought out of my arms one by one. Then I grabbed a handful of hair, and then I scalded it, cut it off. It was then, "Princess," the dagger's hand held and turned rough. "What the hell are you doing?" I opened my eyes wide and looked up at the Crown Prince, whose face was fiercely hardened. "Cut my hair? Why are you cutting a clean head with a dangerously dagger?" "I'm going to make a brush." "Brew?" I was dumbfounded at the sight of the Crown Prince, who rushed at every move. I said, "I'll take care of it, so I asked you to wait a moment, Your Highness." I forced my hand out of his grasp and gave him a nonchalant reply. "I'm busy now, so don't interrupt, and wait by my side." "Ungracious, how dare you interrupt the Crown Prince of the Empire?" When he pointed his finger at the place where he was supposed to retreat, he spoke with a blunt tongue, but he backed away. I put the dagger back into my arms, then I rolled up a handful of long cut hair in his hand and grabbed it. The crimson hair curled greedily. I wish I had straight hair. I glanced at the Crown Prince's blonde hair out of regret, but if I didn't want to die, I had to be satisfied with my own. I approached the skull again and gently swept the left finger bone with my hair. Removing foreign substances from a solo dig during a field recovery was a basic part of the basics. My hair was so soft that it was closer to wiping out dirt than to dust it off, but it was much better than before. After a while, though not perfect, the visible foreign substances were removed. But I couldn't take the scroll out right away because of the body rotting and the damp cave humidity. Bone and paper were almost stuck together. What should I do? There was a high possibility that the paper would rip if it was taken out by force. First of all, we need to get rid of the moisture. The tributary cultural properties were very fragile, so they had to be handled carefully. Originally, it was supposed to be embalmed and dried after being moved to an aseptic chamber, but it was nonsense here. Thinking about how to get rid of the scroll, I looked around to see if there was anything useful for removing moisture. Then I found the fallen torch that the Crown Prince had thrown away. That's it. I brushed the cut hair roughly on the floor and quickly approached it. Then, after picking up the pieces of wood, I will crush the ends on the rocks. The charred part of the fire was easily crushed when the water gathered to a certain extent. I crouched down and scraped together with my hands. Then I went back to where the remains were and gently rubbed the charcoal on the surface of the scroll. What else are you doing now? The Crown Prince, who was watching me busily alone, came up again and asked. Of course. We're removing moisture so that we can easily remove the part that sticks to the bone. The Crown Prince, with a vague face, stared at my actions for a long time before opening his mouth. I don't know why we have to go through such a cumbersome process. Why don't we just cut the bones? This is the only way to make sure that no bones, no paper don't get damaged as much as possible. I wish I had a tweezers or a forceps or something. I murmured to myself like I was talking to myself, listening to the grotesque sound of the Crown Prince. When I squatted and applied the charcoal powder with my bare hands to fit my deftness, I missed those common latex gloves. Have you learned archaeology? Suddenly Callisto asked. My hands stopped moving. I soon moved my hands again casually. I've only read a few books at home. The princess is so peculiar. I think you're just picking things that no noblemen do. Thank you for the compliment. After gritting my teeth, I finally finished applying charcoal to both hands of the remains. Now all we have to do is wait a moment for charcoal to soak up the water. The soot-covered hands were a mess. It was when he was looking down at my messy hands with a puzzled look on my face. Suddenly something was pushed and wiped it. The Crown Prince took out his handkerchief and was sticking it out to me. I looked down at it with a look of surprise and accepted it with a thank you. You carry all this stuff with you? It was a question that I asked without much thought, but the Crown Prince snorted as if he was stabbed. What the hell does the princess think of me? That, of course, crazy idiot. A clear word came into my head. I think I should say the brave prince, but I managed to keep my reason and recite it like an excuse. You don't usually carry hand towels in dynamic activities like hunting. My brothers also forget about it often. It was groundless whether the two men often blinked their real handkerchiefs. The Crown Prince gave a suspicious look to my excuse and then spat it out. They probably didn't get it as a gift. Yes, that's what I got from a certain young lady before. I looked down at my hands, which he added with a big smile. The new handkerchief had already become black and dirty. It was when he belatedly discovered daffodils embroidered at the end. Oh no, the princess has put the handkerchief out of use now. I unintentionally ignored the sincerity of the lady. Isn't that right? The Crown Prince held his breast in an exaggerated manner. It was obvious that it was to pick on me. I returned the handkerchief. I was cleaning my hands straight back. Wash it and use it again. You didn't say you'll give me a new handkerchief as a present. The Crown Prince frowned. After all, it sounded like you had lent Mr. a handkerchief to hear that from me. I answered coolly without listening to him. Thank you for lending. How can this girl so mean? The prince, holding a handkerchief with a disapproving face, spoke rudely again. You're the worst, you son of a bitch. It was only for a while to get angry because it was time to scroll down. I took off my jacket one by one. It was because holding old paper with warm bare hands could damage it. It was a little uncomfortable, but I couldn't help but carefully pulled it out by wrapping the scroll with thin parts of the jacket. Fortunately, my idea of using charcoal to soak up moisture was not wrong. It was rather stiff, but I was finally able to pull the scroll between the knuckles of the remains. You don't know how hard I was trying to hold my breath because I was afraid that the paper might break. When I put down my jacket with 2 scrolls on the floor, a sigh of relief popped out. Is it over? Yes, what are you so fond of? You just need to check it out. At the sight of me carefully stretching out my crumpled jacket, the Crown Prince approached with his tongue kicked. Listening to the words in one ear, I carefully examined the state of the scroll. The 2 scrolls were tied with a red and blue leather strap, respectively. The paper was in pretty good condition except for the rotting marks in the middle. No mold or worm marks were visible. Is this some sort of magic preserved like a dead body? As you will know when you open it, the inside of the rotten part may also be intact, as the paper is firmly attached in layers. Having succeeded in getting it out of harm's way, I knew of course I'd move this to a safe place. Collected artifacts are used as research materials after preservation treatment. What are you doing? Come on, open it. But the prince pulled the blue string in front of me. Hold on, as the knot was untied without stopping. The curled scrolls naturally spread out. So carelessly I vented my anger that I shouldn't treat artifacts so ignorant. It was the moment. The light flashed before my eyes. Hidden quest, suspicious cave search success, an ancient magic map was acquired as a reward. Will you take it? Yes, no, it was when I was staring blankly at the system window that suddenly appeared. This is a map of the North Forest. The crown prince, who was scouring the map, muttered in a firm voice. I turned my eyes from the system window to look in the scroll at the speak. Surprisingly, a moving map was drawn inside the paper. If you found the video enjoyable, would you consider recommending it to a friend? Please share what you found most memorable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for updates.